Hello, everyone. My apologies for the delay. I was having a little bit of a technical issue. Hope everyone is doing well this evening. Seeing that there's still a lot of people joining, so I'll just wait a moment, but I think we can start essentially. So, welcome to our webinar on alternative schooling options in Canada. We're going to focus specifically on schools, private schools within Ontario, because we actually do have quite a bit of private schools that are very respectful of parental rights and very pro-family. So we reached out to several of them, and we were able to get a few representatives of some private schools in Ontario to speak to parents and answer some of the common questions that they have. So we across Canada, we often have parents who they want to pull their children out of the public education system for a variety of reasons, beyond just political indoctrination and beyond, the sexualization of children, and especially in Ontario with Doug Ford's sex ed, but also, just because of academia, because there are low literacy rates, because of, low scores in mathematics. Children are not getting the quality of education that they used to. So for a variety of reasons, parents are pulling their children out of the public schools, public or Catholic, but like the Catholic publicly funded schools. And, it goes beyond the sexualization of children and the sex ed agenda and the political indoctrination. We know it's rampant. There's, it doesn't stop in the schools. They're just trying to, they're politicizing everything. So beyond that, there's issues in academics. And so we have parents reaching out to us saying, okay, we want to pull our children out of the school, but we can't homeschool, or we don't want to homeschool. So what other options are available to us? So we're going to be talking a little bit about the alternatives that parents have, and chiefly among them, private schools is what we'll be focusing on today. So I'm sorry that my camera looks like I'm coming off a little bit glossy, but if everyone can see and hear me okay, then I think we're okay. You can type in the chat if there's any issues with the audio or the visuals. But I will now be introducing our special guests for our panel on alternative schooling options. So to begin, we have Dr. Jeremy Bannon, who is a board member of St. Joseph Academy in St. Catharines, Ontario. And we also have a Mr. Greg Boris, who is the school head for Our Lady of the Pillar Academy, which is in Strathroy, Ontario. And both of them have taken times out of their busy schedule to join us tonight and answer some questions about their schools, but also just private school broadly, what options parents have when it comes to alternative choices beyond the public education system, and some obstacles that stand in parents' way. What are the most common questions? I'm going to go through it with them, and they'll each have an opportunity to speak directly to you, the parents. And then at the end, we will do a brief Q&A where you can ask some questions to either me or one of our panelists. So without further ado, I will invite our panelists to be able to speak, and that way you can see them as well. So there we have Dr. Bannon. Welcome.
Hi, thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for coming on. And here we have Mr. Gregory Boris. I think I've promoted him to panelist. There we go. So once the camera is on, then we can begin. And thank you again for being with us, to both of you.
Hi there.
Hello. How are you both?
Very well.
Doing well, thank you.
Good to see you, Jeremy.
Good to see you as well, Greg.
Long time no see.
Absolutely.
All right, so I can hear you both well, and I'm just going to jump right into our questions. So I will begin with you, Dr. So can you tell parents a little bit about what alternative schooling is and how it differs from traditional models?
Yeah, so thanks for the question. So, alternative schooling can mean a lot of things. And so I can really speak most specifically to St. Joseph Academy, but I know that there are other alternative schooling models that take different philosophies. And so the root of St. Joseph Academy is the Catholic faith and the Catholic educational tradition, faithful to the magisterium of the church. And so, what that really looks like for us is, really developing the full person, both the mind, the body, and the spirit. So, excellence in rigor, because these are true goods that we should strive towards. But then, additionally, the formation of character, virtue, and the building up in faith of the individuals is foremost and kind of primary for our school. But we don't see these things at all as mutually exclusive. It is the both and that we seek to be academically rigorous and very faithful as well. And so we believe that is absolutely captured in our tradition, and that's what we sort of seek to try to do at St. Joseph Academy. And how that would really differ from other schools is again, so we do have publicly funded Catholic schools, and certainly this is not our school is not an outright condemnation or anything like that, or adversarial or anything like that. We sort of seek to give parents options. And so sometimes, we will be a great option for parents. Other times it might not be a great fit, and that's sort of an active discernment between us as a school and the parents as well. And they can really sort of see for themselves. They go, I'd encourage them to go, visit your public schools, check it out, see what they teach, see what the teachers are like. It'll often cost you less money. And so that's definitely something to check out as well. And so, yeah, so we have a good relationship with our the publicly funded Catholic schools, and we sort of seek to maybe instill some healthy competition, right? In terms of if maybe kids start coming to us, they might ask themselves, oh, what might we do differently to keep them with us, right? And vice versa. And so I think healthy competition is great for the consumer, which are parents, who are the first educators of their kids. So maybe there's a few thoughts uh, on that topic. I think you might be on mute.
I am. Thank you. My Zoom just told me. Thank you for that answer. That was wonderful. I'm going to just pose the same question to you, Mr. Boris. So, what alternative schooling is and how it differs from traditional models? And I think parents specifically, I think, are curious. Like, I know specifically you're going to be representing your school, of course, but just in general, like, what options are out there beyond homeschooling? I mean, private school is essentially one of the biggest other options that parents have, but like what makes it different than the traditional school? What's the beauty of sending your child to a private school where the curriculum can be very different from what the Ministry of Education mandates?
Great question. St. Joseph Academy and Our Lady of the Pillar Academy are in a very similar vein. So I would really echo pretty much everything Dr. Bannon said about his school. I think to the question, Aristotle always says we should define our terms to start. And so it can be defined a lot of different ways. I have colleagues, I'd say probably one of the biggest differences is the pedagogical approach. Just broadly, if you're talking about what are alternative schools, right? They're all going to have a different theory of mind, theory of the human person, and how the human person most appropriately integrates with truth. So my school, Our Lady of the Pillar Academy, definitely comes from the classical education tradition. Sometimes it's also called the perennial Catholic education tradition. There are a lot of different names for this thing that we're trying to do, which is, as Dr. Bannon said, seeing the whole person and really avoiding siloing knowledge, and really seeing that the truth is one, the truth is a person, the truth is someone that you can have a relationship with, and that when you have a relationship with, in the Catholic tradition, like truth as Jesus Christ, the Son of God, that you're going to start seeing connections and you're going to see reality better. So a mathematical reality will express itself in other scientific forms and in historical ways and in interpersonal dynamics. And to study one domain should give you a more complete understanding of another. And you should not be separating, a religion class from a history class, from a science class, from a phys ed class, from a music class. These should all be avenues in towards the truth. So I know other traditions will view that differently, like Montessori obviously will be a much more play-based, and I think many people would consider Montessori alternative education as well. Um, but at our school, we definitely view that through a Christological lens.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's something that a lot of parents look for, the kind of integrated approach where their faith, the values are brought into each and every one of their students' classes or courses, however you want to pose it. Just this, it kind of creates a basis for an integrated life. And I think that's what a lot of parents look for, like a well-rounded, balanced education, whether it be Christian or not. A lot of private schools offer that, where they have, they make connections in between what they do throughout the day. Not everything is isolated, as you said. So that brings me to our next question, which is what kind of families and students might benefit most from alternative schooling? I come from a large family with a background in both homeschooling, private school, and public school. And we all see how children often fall through the cracks in the public system because there is often a lack of one-on-one support. Oftentimes the 30 plus students to one teacher ratio can be an issue. And, we've seen that, throughout the years with certain education reforms, things have improved, but also we're still seeing that there's issues in specifically Ontario with our literacy rates, with our math. So students often fall through the cracks. What can parents look forward to when they're seeking out these alternatives, especially when it comes to their children who might need special or extra attention? And I guess I'll put it to Dr. Bannon first.
Great. So I guess the question is what kind of families that would benefit from independent education? Yeah, so I think it depends on there's a lot of things. I think so firstly, I think depending on values. So there are many great independent schools out there that come in many sort of creeds. There are, very robust secular private schools, uh, Protestant, Catholic, Jewish, Muslim as well. And they can be quite, good in all of their own rights. And so finding, what aligns with value-wise, will be very important. And just sort of seeing, we all have, different values, different perspectives. So finding what sort of jives with you. Oftentimes, I can sort of speak for St. Joseph Academy. We've got the smaller class sizes, and then so you're certainly getting more individualized time with teachers, and a lot more time parents with teachers. The communication is a lot better. I mean, we're kind of the opposite of bureaucratic in terms of parents being able to bring things up, and teachers likewise. Um, and so, yeah, so parents looking for smaller class sizes, same values, and then as well as, maybe more in the curriculum in certain ways. And so, in some of these, call it more contemporary approaches to education, oftentimes the great literary tradition that we all are kind of heirs of is sort of forgotten. And then so in some of these more independent schools, we have the freedom, we have the flexibility to go back to that. And then as well as focus on other things that people might find beneficial. So, for example, at our school, we do teach Latin to the children, and so that's not available in sort of the public system. And then as well as we're also free to make other programs. So just starting this semester, we've got an after school piano program, and so after school, the children can stay, and there's a piano teacher that'll be there, and kind of to try to make the extracurriculars sort of a one-stop shop for parents, which can oftentimes be difficult, especially as the families grow, to sort of say, okay, mom and dad, I'm going to this end of town, you're going to that end of town. We got soccer, we got piano, we got this. And so, trying to customize the school to our family's needs, and group bargaining and stuff. If there's enough of us here, why doesn't the teacher come to us instead of us spreading out? And so we can get creative. Really, we can kind of be a school for the families, and to help them, sort of pursue the good of their child alongside them.
Thank you for that. And I'll pose the same question to you, Mr. Boris.
Absolutely. One of my mentors says almost exactly that we shouldn't be a school for students, we should be a school for families. And then one of the beautiful things that allows is for individual families' charisms to really shine. Um, so when you have people in the community who are really excellent hockey coaches, right, your students benefit as a result. And so to the original question of who would benefit the most? I think part of the purpose of alternative education, broadly speaking, is that you can have a more intentional view, right, of all the things we're talking about, before and after school, your values, your alignments. And um, I think I think what I hear from my community is this is not just about um, their education alone. It's about the whole character formation, right, and building up of, in our context, of the kingdom of God. And so we're drawing together families with like-minded intentions, and then you get unexpected beautiful fruits too that turn into lifelong friendships. Um, so I think everyone would benefit from a more intentional and explicit expression of what they're looking for in their education. I think that's part of what's missing in the publicly funded system, is there's kind of this vague, implicit idea of what education is. And I think everyone benefits when it becomes more explicit about what we're trying to do, and when people are able to have the freedom to pursue the good as they understand it more vigorously.
Thank you. And since we're discussing alternative options to the public school system, to public education in general, I'd like to bring up homeschooling. As a mother of two still very young children myself, I think I often wonder, what are the pros and cons, I guess you can say. I guess I'm still in the discernment process, but what would you say to parents who are considering considering their options between homeschooling and private school? Not to say one is better than the other, because it's an individual family decision, but maybe from your own experiences, also being a part of private schooling, and maybe having families who came from homeschooling or potentially went back to homeschooling, what would you say the biggest differences are between homeschooling and private schooling, especially since a lot of families opt for one or the other when they're pulling their children out of this public school system? So we can start again with Dr. Bannon.
So Greg and I were so aligned, and so I hate kind of taking all the answers.
Oh,
So
sure. Yeah.
why don't he
Okay.
start,
Sorry.
and then I can try to pick it up as well, because again,
Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
wouldn't be fair.
For sure.
You're very gracious.
All right.
I think something that I've seen a couple times is so there are many different approaches to literacy. And I think it's, as Dr. Bannon might say, physician, know thyself. So I think when families are thinking about homeschooling, I think it's a beautiful option. Homeschooling is so wonderful. It should be so well supported and protected, and beautiful things come out of homeschooling. So that's absolutely, without a doubt, true. I think it's good for parents to be honest with themselves about where their strengths are and where their weaknesses are, and to have kind of a conversation amongst themselves and then with a school, really, to open it up to say, here's where I think we might need more support. And I think oftentimes there can be flexibility, especially in these schools, to say, okay, well, how could we work together so that everyone's needs are really being met? One area where I see that often happen is literacy, where you have very, very competent, intelligent parents who might not be as comfortable teaching literacy. They might be amazing once you're dealing with grade 12 literature and they really understand the themes and the motifs and all of that. But there is a real art and science now to literacy instruction. And so we do occasionally see students coming in from homeschooling where their math is super sharp, they've got lots of wonderful skills, but literacy might be lagging behind a little bit because they don't have the same kind of structured approach that that many schools are able to offer.
Thank you for that. And again, if you have anything to add to that, that would be great.
Yeah, no, echoing a lot of that, and I think, yeah, again, the families really have to know themselves and know their limits. I know homeschooling is very popular these days. It's a booming movement. You hear like some of the statistics in the States of like, only a few decades ago being it very small, and now it's millions of households, right? And so I think it's a nice, good movement, and I see why people are doing it. But I mean, just from my experience as well, it's just like people should really know what their know their limits. Because the thing is, when you're dealing with your children's education, it might be a nice sort of whimsical idea to just be like, okay, we're just gonna whip up breakfast and we're gonna have all of our schoolwork done by noon, and then we're gonna, go out and hunt insects and do all of these things and have this very rich experience of education. And yeah, oftentimes it's not that, especially when you have more kids, right? When you have your first kid, it's all quiet. It's very easy to sit at the table with them, go through the work. And then you have two kids, and then, it's a toddler that you're kind of bouncing there to. And then you got a third kid. And so the old one, then the toddler, then the baby, fourth, and so on, right? And so that can be very difficult no matter who you are. Like genuinely, no matter who you are. I know very capable people who've tried homeschooling and found it to be, whoa, this is pretty tough, right? It's not quite as easy. And so for the people who can do it, fantastic. God bless them. It's a great option for people. The benefit of going to a private school is that you have specialists in their area, and it's very structured as well. And as well as that, we're finite beings, and so parents, being on 24/7, 365, no matter who you are, it can get quite tiring. Baby's up in the night, kids are up early, maybe somebody's sick, and then you're going to do a whole day of being teacher as well. That's quite a lot. And so again, for families who sort of recognize their limitations, um, sometimes having that independent option can be good for them to sort of say, okay, you know what, these are trusted people who've got a plan, and they've got the time, and they've got, the dedicated energy to go through the curriculum with the kids. Um, it's good. But then of course you miss time at home, right? So again, there's no such thing as a free lunch. And so I know that people who have spent a lot of time homeschooling, they do love a lot about it, the relationships that they're able to keep with their parents, their family. And there's a lot of rich moments there too. So again, as you said, it's very much a discernment of each family to kind of say, okay, what are our resources? What are our abilities? Where are our children at? What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? And how can we best move forward as a family?
And maybe just one other point to talk about the recent popularity and surge in homeschooling. I think a lot of that is due to a good common sense return to first principles of parents as first educators. And um, that can, so while that is good and common sense, I think it can at times also be motivated by fear of the genuine harm and like very serious harm that can be done by a poor or malicious education, which is, I know, a lot of what PAFE advocates against. But to add into that dialogue around discernment, um, you know, private education is not created equal. So looking with the school and really seeing, do you understand yourselves as delegated parts of me as a parent, as first educator, right? Do you understand that I am always going to be the first educator, but I'm making a relationship with you to do that specialist work that Jeremy was talking about.
No, that's a very good point. I think, checking in with reality and being like, am I able to do this? Is this something I can dedicate energy, like you said, to and having that conversation is going to be different for every family. But I think you brought up a lot of really good points when parents are kind of having those discussions and discerning between the two options. And I think especially if parents are going to be parting with their children for 7 hours of the day, they really want to know that they can trust those teachers and the school. And that's why it's so important to get to know our private schools and get to know what alternative options we have. And I think that the beauty of a smaller private school is that they can have great close relationships with the teachers and with the school administration, and really know where their children are being sent and where they're growing up, because really, I mean, they end up spending a lot of their days 5 days out of the 7 of the week at school, so it ends up raising them as well. And I think that can be a very good thing, but I understand the caution parents have with that. And I think a lot of the boom in homeschooling can also be attributed to COVID, and potentially also the boom in smaller private schools. And I think that like you said, it returned to common sense that parents, being the first educators of their children, are now maybe perhaps more in tune with what their children are learning at school and what's going on in their minds. And I think that's a good thing. That's a step in the right direction for society as a whole. So that will bring me to one of our last questions before we go to Q&A. which is what are the biggest obstacles that families often face in seeking these alternatives? So whether they be financial, whether they be, maybe driving school, drop off and pick up, maybe school's far away. So what do you see being some of the bigger obstacles that parents face when seeking out these alternative options for their children's education? And we can start with Mr. Boris again this time.
Thank you. Yes, I think you've named the two biggest ones right there. When you're paying out of pocket, that just is another line item that you have to balance in your budget, and so that is challenging. So yeah, that just is a challenge, especially in an era where there's ongoing inflation. It's harder for everyone to balance their budget, and that just is a genuine concern. And then transportation. And so very often these schools are in neat niche properties, which may not be the prime real estate that's super easy to access because they need to find lower either rent rates or mortgage rates, and so they are kind of shunted to other properties that might not be as convenient for most parents.
Thank you. And if you could go ahead, Dr. Bannon.
Yeah, I think another one, like, so of course, echoing those as well. I think awareness can be a big obstacle as well. I know that there are many, there are many parents, call it in the publicly funded system that, aren't quite happy, and they would love, to know more about, independent options, and then maybe they can afford it, and that's not going to be an obstacle, but they just don't know about it. And so we've had, families that, found out about us and like, where have you been? Right? It's like, well, we've been here the whole time, right? And we've been trying to, put it out there and put it in our channels and, online, but yeah, it's you can only get so far with your reach, and we try to do more. There's word of mouth, but awareness can sometimes be an issue for parents, just because sometimes it's not even the most evident thing. You Google it, and there's a whole art of search engine optimization and making it easy for your school to be found and all these things. And so sometimes these schools, juggling a lot of other things, that's pretty low on the priority list. Optimizing search engine results and that. So yeah, awareness. Um, yeah, and then yeah, distance too. So as sort of Greg was saying that you're not always very close. So okay, great, I found a school, it totally aligns, but wow, it's like a 40-minute drive, right? It's like, okay, it might be a great fit for your family and a good place for your kid, and you feel very comfortable, but are you ready to eat 40 minutes each way? And that's a lot for people, no matter what you're driving to. Um, so yeah, I think that, and then sometimes as well as if kids have needs. So that's, kind of one thing where the system, the publicly funded system, can be strong in some contexts, is they're quite well funded when it comes to special needs and other extra resources. Whereas sometimes these smaller schools with more, call it, competitive or affordable tuitions, they don't have all these auxiliary staff just on hand to just kind of pick up, or have funding for the EA for the children with, autism or other things like that. And so that's, you can have parents that they would love to have their kids in an independent school, but for one reason or another, they have extra needs that just can't be met, sort of in that context. And so they have to really just reckon with what's available, and what's sort of the best way forward, trying to weigh all of the goods on the table. Um, yeah, I think that kind of covers probably most of them, most of the big obstacles. I don't know if
I think this is a smaller one, but it does also happen. There's the adage in business that if you're for everyone, you're for no one. And so these schools are often very niche, and then it sometimes happens that you get too niche, and you align 90% of things. But and this is not a criticism; it's just a funny dynamic that a lot of the people who are independent minded enough to seek out alternative options are also very convicted with what they're looking for, and they're really going to pursue exactly what they want, and all the power to them. But sometimes it's, you know, we're aligned on 95%, but this 5% here, this is a sticking point, and that's not the pedagogical method I want. I don't, sometimes it's, screen teetotalers. Like there will be just no screens, right? Or there are too many screens. There are not enough screens. There's too many great books. There are not enough great books. Too much Latin, not enough Latin. You do sometimes find, okay, we just you can't please everyone.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's not a grocery store, so it's that's definitely something that I think parents have to ask themselves. If they want to pursue private school, at the end of the day, they're not able to kind of customize it and personalize it as much as they would be able to do so to the experience of homeschooling. So that's another thing to that point, that it's a big difference between homeschooling and private schooling, is that you're kind of surrendering control in a sense that the school might not meet every exact check on your wish list. But if they hit 90 or 95, I think that that's pretty good. And I think if parents are convicted enough to want to send their children to public school, and they think that, sorry, a private school, and it's a better option for them than homeschooling, then of course there's going to be some sacrifices made. But I think overall, those are both very good answers to the question. And oftentimes knowledge is a big obstacle. Like Dr. Bannon said, a lot of people often don't know that PAFE exists. And when they hear, look, where have you been? And we've been around for a long time, but, just advocates for them as parents. And so I think that's a broader issue in Canada in general. Maybe just we don't often connect our circles enough. Like-minded people don't often get together enough. But I think that when people know that these schools exist, it's great, and that's why we're happy to be having this webinar, and highlighting your two schools today. But there are plenty of other private school options out there, and not just Catholic, but Christian, Protestant, and other faiths as well. And I think that's also another obstacle that often parents find, that they might have a private school very close to them, but it's Protestant instead of Catholic, or Catholic instead of Protestant, or it's secular and they'd rather a religious school. So it's I think it's important that and we have a directory on our website of different private schools, and it will be obviously updated, and especially this year, because we've had a lot of new schools coming up, like after COVID especially, there's been a boom. But I think it's important that parents have that resource to see what private schools and what homeschool co-ops and things like that are around. So be sure to keep an eye out on our website for those directories, because that's an important aspect that's an important element of connecting people. And I will get to our last question, but before I do, if anyone has a question, please feel free to type it into the Q&A box so that we can start getting to them right away after our last question. So, I'm sorry. Our last question, I just wanted you both to kind of address the biggest misconception that parents or even just the general public often have about private schools, and why they're a misconception. So I can, whoever wants to begin can begin. It's I don't want to be biased. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm really I'm not
No,
trying.
flip the coin. Yeah, I think it depends because again, independent schools come in different shapes and sizes. And then so based on people's exposure to private schools, they'll have different sort of stereotypes in mind. And so maybe somebody went to a private school growing up and they found it to be stuffy and strict and closed community or whatever. Then that's going to be the essentially the bias that they have there. Other times people will, there'll be like a very posh kind of elite private school near them, and they say, oh, all these private schools, they're just for the elite. They cost an arm and a leg. You can never afford it. And that's just for the elite. It's not kind of for me. Where it's like, well, there are some pretty reasonably priced independent schools as well. And so yeah, I would say, they'll maybe think that maybe it's sort of too niche, right? They'll say, oh, this is like just totally niche. These people are very focused on a particular thing. Say they're like religious, they'll say like, oh, these people are very like zealots or something like that. These people are too kind of like too hardcore, like we wouldn't fit in. Where it's like, no, like I mean, like for example, St. Joseph Academy, we're sort of, strive to be like sort of a very faithful school, and we've got a broad sort of swath of people from kind of, very practicing to kind of practicing to not so practicing. But again, they're on board with the mission of the school. They like how we do things, and we're on the same page, and it's working great. Um, so yeah, so sometimes it can kind of be depending. Maybe it's a religious school, they'll have baggage around that. Sometimes they'll think it's very elite or elitist, and that's like maybe the mentality that kids have, which is yeah, in many cases just not true at all. It really is going to be case to case, and um, so that's why I would encourage parents who are interested, for an independent school, you check it out. Talk to the talk to the headmaster, talk to the headmistress, meet a teacher, go for a tour through. Oftentimes, sometimes at these open houses, they'll have families that are there and say, have a conversation with them, or even say, hey, is there a family I could reach out to talk about their experience as well, just to sort of see, hey, what's it like here? What's the community like? Who are the kind of kids my kids are going to be around? And so find out for yourself because we're really not all the same. Um, that's what I'd say.
Yeah, I'd say I'd echo all of that. I think the old stereotype was snobby, pretentious, and entitled. I think the kind of new agey uh, stereotype would be, oh, they got a crocodile in spelling this year, like very out to lunch, very um, you know out of touch with reality in a completely different sort of way. And I think yes, getting to know the current students and seeing the graduates is really the best kind of test and say, okay, who are you graduating? What are you doing with the students here? And who are the people that are walking out?
Thank you. So we have one question. So thank you for your answers to that last question. We're going to get into Q&A, but I've already started looking at the questions. So before I jump in, I just want to say that I'm copying and pasting the link to the private school directory from our website into the chat because someone asked me to do that. So I've answered that question. So I'll get to if there's any more questions, please feel free to type them in because we only have two right now, but some are a little bit specific. So I do encourage you, if you have a specific question about your child and their educational needs, to reach out to schools directly and maybe see if if you're seeking out a private school, see what options they have and if they meet your needs. But to generalize a few of these questions, someone saying that if their child needs extra support, either educationally or medically within a private school, are there situations like that within either of your schools? And are they expected to pay extra for an additional EA support? So for instance, if someone has a learning disability or autism, or, if they needed an EA or just an extra support person, I don't know if your private schools would offer that or if maybe others do, but are parents paying extra for that, or is that included within what your school offers?
So that hasn't happened in my experience thus far, but from one of my mentors, the kind of received wisdom is that if a family is pursuing, um, if they would like to send their child, but they need additional support, there are some programs available, not many. But if they would otherwise just rather pay for tuition plus kind of an EA, I think the suggestion that I've heard that I think seems prudent from a school administrative perspective is to have the school hire that EA so that you avoid some kind of potential conflicts of interests. So that is the EA hired by the individual family who needs the additional support, or are they working for the school under the direction of the administration so that everything's streamlined? Um, there's not huge funding out there for it, but sometimes the community healthcare, the CCHs, I think, sometimes have some funding for that.
Thank you. That's good to know. And if you want to,
Yeah, it's to kind of at least at our school, you would definitely have to, pay in addition. In terms of we do our best to offer a very competitive tuition rate, especially compared to other private schools, which doesn't leave a lot on the table. We're still sort of fundraising every year, and I know that's regular practice for a lot of these independent schools. And so that being said, I think the ones that are maybe around for longer, more established, and maybe a little more expensive, there is a little bit extra. So my wife and I, before coming on the board and helping to start St. Joseph Academy, we did tour a number of independent schools in our area. And so there were some schools that did have minimal extra assistance or whatever. Like if your kid, needed maybe a little bit of extra exam time, or, needed to be helped along in something in their curriculum, there were sort of floating ECE sort of teachers that, it was their full-time job to sort of, teachers in the class would sort of say, hey, we got a couple stragglers. Pull them aside, see what you could do to help kind of move them along, because it's going to be difficult to help kind of move them with the whole class. Um, yeah, but so that's a lot of time it's just sort of a funding issue. That being said as well, I mean, I have some family members who attended a very elite, prestigious private school, and they had a son who did have just even behavioral needs. Like honestly, not it was just there was things going on, and had some behavioral needs. And the school, after, I mean, they were already paying, like we're talking significant amount of money, sort of said, "Yep, you're on the hook for an EA." And they're like, "Really? After, like, we're paying you all this money for all of our kids and need an EA in addition to that?" And the answer was just plainly yes. And so again, and then so that would be at the other end of the spectrum, where you have a very expensive school, very cash flow positive, and they're kind of charging for extra depending on the circumstance. So I think, ultimately it really comes down to what's the need. What's the need for your child, and how can the school sort of support it? Sometimes the answer will be yes, sometimes the answer will be no. So again, it'll be case by case.
Thank you. Yes, no, it definitely will vary by school. We have another question here, which I don't know if you would, obviously you're not going to know everything about all the private schools in the broader GTA or Ontario, but maybe you can specifically answer for your schools if they are electronic device free, because someone is asking if there are electronic device free private schools in the Toronto area, or at least if they're not fully electronic device free, how does it look like? How does your relationship with screens look like in your school? What electronic devices do you use? And perhaps if you do know of a school that's electronic device free, if that's what this parent is looking for, then feel free to answer that, please. So
I'm not familiar with any schools that are entirely electronics free. We certainly we try and be very intentional and relatively minimal with our screens. So we view them, they're never a replacement for a teacher, but they can be a very useful tool, especially for certain types of repetition. It can be very useful to see math problems in a certain way, or to run through drills. Um, yeah.
Yeah, nor do I know that a specific one that would be absolutely screen free in sort of like a sort of pure way. But certainly I know a number of Catholic schools in Toronto that would certainly sort of see that try not to make the student beholden to technology. They kind of want you, as sort of Mr. Boris said, really use it as a tool. And so that's how we use it at St. Joseph Academy. I'd say screens are very sparsely used, like if at all. But sometimes you have like for the upper grades you have a presentation, and you want to essentially cover slides. PowerPoint can be extremely useful, right? Especially for like group learning. It can be very useful. But as far as every kid having a tablet or a Chromebook or anything like that, that's not what we're interested in. And I think more and more, even a lot of the elite institutions are moving away from it. Just the evidence is very clear. It doesn't matter what your politics are or your values. It's just for people who do value the good of the kids, the evidence is becoming more and more clear that all these screens everywhere are not good for the children, and they're not good for their learning. And so I think that's moving across the spectrum, no matter where people are at value-wise. Um, but yeah, so I would say we use it as a tool very intentionally, as Mr. Porce would said, would be our sort of philosophy.
Yeah, no, that's very good to hear, and that's something we look for when we're, discussing the public system as well. That are they optimizing screens and technology for the benefit of the children, or are they offloading work onto devices and computers and TVs and all of that? Screens can be optimized and used as a tool, and they can be very helpful. And there are a lot of programs that do help children. And we're not by any means against screen. Like PAFE is not against technology or screens, but of course it's important that children get a quality education and that their teachers are not replacing their important job with the computer. So thank you for your answers to that question. Someone is asking if when a graduate of one of your schools applies to university. I don't know if your schools go to secondary. Do neither of them do? Okay. If someone was private schooled through high school, would they be applying to university as a homeschooler? I believe the answer is no, but if
Not necessarily. So there are a couple different ways that you can go about it. There are both inspected and uninspected high schools, like private high schools in Ontario. So in order to get an OSSD, an Ontario Secondary School Diploma, the school has to be inspected by the Ministry of Education. It's a very involved process, and so that would grant, like, an OSSD is what you would get at the publicly funded institutions. There are schools in Ontario, I think, Mère de Dieu in Ottawa, and I'm forgetting the other one, um, Stella Maris, I think, also near Ottawa. I think those are both privately funded Catholic high schools. There are also schools that there are ways you can apply to university. You can write the SATs. You can write other standardized tests from the states and apply with those kind of as accreditation for the learning that has been done.
Thank you. I'm just going through some of the questions here. Yeah, no, I'm trying to think of if I know any that go to high school. I don't, maybe you know this, Dr. Bannon, but does the Oakville School, does that stop at grade 8 as well?
MBCA
Yes.
specifically, yeah, they stop at grade 8.
Okay.
They don't have a high school, and so yeah, no, certainly, I think Mr. Boris is better versed than me than that. I mean, we're just so again, we're in the first year of operation, so we're very like we got to keep narrow and focus on our elementary school. But I have heard that it is, yeah, to get the OSSD, it's difficult, but again, there are other ways. And so one thing that we're kind of talking about in addition to the SAT and the ACT and other standardized tests that's interesting is something called the CLT, the Classical Learning Test, which is a test out of the States, and it's growing. And so hopefully in 10 years, 15 years, when our kindergarten kids are graduating, it's a little more mainstream and adapted because it's specifically for children who have gone through classical education, right? Because a lot of times you call it the mainstream education, it's made to do well on tests like the SAT. And so classical education, it's very rigorous, very good education, and it produces great individuals, but it's not made in the image of the SAT. And then so you can have very bright, capable kids coming out who are not going to perform very well because that's not like sort of the style they've been trained for. The CLT is hoping to make an equivalent for classically trained um, kids, kind of coming through to validate them for university. So that's something interesting and something that's certainly on our radar as far as being in the classical world and having standardized tests to be able to really take the pulse on your students and see how they're doing.
Thank you. So a lot of people are asking questions about schools in their area. So I did post the directory from our website, which also has links to other directories so that they're being updated frequently, which is great. So we list some private schools. We also list some homeschool co-ops. If that's something you're interested, that's on a different page, but I link the direct page to the private school resource. So if you're wondering if there's a school in your area, you can take a look at that. They list Christian, Catholic, and just secular private schools, because I know there are probably a few other ones that I'm not remembering the name of right now in the GTA that do go to high school. So thank you for that. I've addressed that question. So I think that kind of covers everything. I'm reading a couple of these last questions. A lot of them were in relation to post-secondary and university, and we've covered that. Yeah, I think that's it. Okay, so I'm going to read this whole question out loud because it's hard. Okay, so someone said, most schools are age segregated with one age per classroom. We have found that with multiple ages in a homeschool environment, the older children assist the younger children. I suspect that multiple ages in one classroom more closely monitors that family, i.e. what God designed. I'm wondering if you have experience with the advantages or disadvantages of age integration versus age segregation. So in your schools, and I know that in the public system, there's also split classes. So that's kind of an example of having grade 2s and 3s together or grade 5s and 6s together. So I guess the person's just asking what your experience is with age segregation versus integration, because with homeschooling, all the siblings are together.
Yeah, I can kind of speak, Tess. So we do have a number of sort of split age grades, especially we're in our first year of operation, and so we're not a huge school quite yet. And so it's really a double-edged sword. I mean, on one sense that the I find the older ones, they really, on their good days, they rise to the occasion, and they're, giving guidance to the younger ones, and we'll even have at time like some peer reading hours. And so the children who are in, say, like grade 6, 7, 8, they come and they're reading to the kindergartens and the grade 1s. And so it's a really nice moment for them to come along and be the teacher, right? And which is actually consolidates learning as well, right? You learn it yourself, but when you teach it, and you show it to somebody else, that really shows a mastery of it. And so that's, one of the nice things of having our grades, a little closer, but we do have sort of separate time for that. At the same time, the multi-grade classrooms, um, you're dealing with sometimes multiple curriculums, which it does take a skilled educator to really navigate that well. It's totally possible, and it has been done in many contexts, and split grades are done even in the publicly funded system. So it's doable, but certainly your educator has to have their head on straight, know what they're doing. They have to have a plan, in terms of to approach that and execute that well.
I think to build on all of those good points, there's this concept by Csikszentmihalyi on flow, and so this is the ideal. This is ideally we're all working in a flow state, kind of all the time. But flow is where you have a pretty balanced ledger between your skill level and the challenge, and when they're really tightly balanced. So you're applying all your skill to this challenge. That's where you learn optimally and where you really move the fastest. Now that's hard to do at the best of times, but just adding into that conversation of, the wider the grade collection gets, I think the harder it is to keep the challenge at the right level for each student. And so if you have a narrower, like of just two grades together, that's one fewer variable for your teacher to be managing in trying to keep the challenge level just high enough for those students.
Well, thank you for that. I think that is all of our questions. I'm just going to double check. I had a lot of people letting me know that they couldn't see the link. So I double checked, and I made sure that it says everyone, because I think at first it was sent to just the hosts and panelists. So that was my bad. But I will read the URL. It's pafe.ca PAFE.ca/independent schools. So if you just Google PAFE, you can go onto our website and there's also just a page. You can see it on the very top menu, independent schools. You can find it that way, or just www.pafe.ca/independent schools. I put it in the chat now, so I hope you can all see it. And that's a great resource. And I'm sure there are other lists and directories out there that you might want to just cross-reference and see if in case we're missing a school. But I'd like to thank both of our panelists for their time tonight. And I'd like to thank everyone who attended. I hope that you were able to learn and have some of your your questions answered. Oh my goodness, I'm a mom of 2 young kids, so I'm sorry. My brain is tired at the end of the day. But I hope your questions were answered. And I'd like to thank you all for joining. And again, thank you, Dr. Bannon, and thank you, Mr. Boris from St. Joseph and from Our Lady of the Pillar Academy, again in St. Catharines and in Strathroy. So thank you both, and I hope you have a good evening. Thank you to everyone who attended, and have a good night.
Yeah, thanks for having us, and thanks for all the great work you do at PAFE.
Thank you so much.